Hello, my name is Raiyon Hunter, and welcome to Sisters in the Round. Sisters in the Round is dedicated to fostering an inclusive and empowering community within the theater industry, specifically for intergenerational Black women. Its vision extends beyond traditional professional spaces and aims to create a vibrant community playground where informal and casual conversation can flourish. Today, we have here Hana Sharif, who is the current artistic director of Aetna Stage and a director, producer, and playwright. Hi, Hana. How are you today?
I'm great, Raiyon. It's great to see you and so excited to be here in conversation with both of you.
Yes, thank you so much. We are so grateful to have you, especially with, just starting Aetna. We know how busy you are, so this is really, really a treat for us. So the first question I'd like to ask you, just to start it off, is, what birthed your love and passion for theater?
That's a good question. Theater and storytelling in particular is how I have always understood myself in the world. So when I had questions, I would write myself to the answers through story. I would put those questions in the body of a character, and I would try and figure out how to explore the world through the storytelling of those characters. And so I actually don't recall a time in my life where storytelling was not at the core of my ability to deconstruct the world that I was in. And also, as I got older, it became more important as a vehicle for writing myself into the center, because there is all kinds of intersectionality that people will try and marginalize. And what I understood is that if I could name myself, if I could claim my own space, then I could mitigate their attempts to marginalize me or pigeonhole me into a space. And so I would say that storytelling was always at the core. I grew up in a family that really, my parents both loved the arts and encouraged, us to experience the arts, all kinds of art, dance and music and opera and symphony. But I really fell in love with the theater very, very young. My mother used to say that I was a very dramatic child, and so she put me in theater classes as a way of channeling that energy. But it was really, I think, a great gift. I loved, when I was younger, I always loved acting, but more than that, I loved creating stories and having my friends and my brothers, perform those stories. So I think that there was a part of me that was always a director and a producer as well, from 7 or 8. And I just didn't know it was a career. I didn't know that it would be how I would serve with my life at that time, but I knew that it was a space that I felt liberated and free.
Yeah, so you said a little bit of talked a little bit about you didn't know that would be the space that you would serve. What was the journey from that initial love and passion for theater and finding out that this is what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I would say that Spelman was a huge part of that in terms of my journey. I had directed and produced my first real show when I was 17, a senior in high school, and I loved it. But I didn't think that theater was a viable career. I knew that I kind of had this philosophical belief that the way we serve what I call God and whatever anyone else calls it, the universe, whatever that kind of entity is, that is bigger than you. But for me, the way that I could serve God would be to serve humanity. And when I looked across the world we were living in, there was so much frustration and pain and inequity. And so I went to Spelman thinking that I was going to be a civil rights attorney and that was how I was going to live a life of service. And in my freshman year at Spelman, the head of the department, Professor Glenda Dickerson, announced that she was leaving Spelman. And that was really a sad moment for many of us. She was such an extraordinary teacher. She really rigorous training. And, my class in particular, Rebel Class of 2000, I think many of us were like, we don't want to get lost in the transition. And we also had these kind of ideas and hopes and dreams about stories that we didn't think were telling speaking to us or answering the questions that we had about the world. And so a group of us in my apartment sophomore year sat on the floor and kind of created our own like mission manifesto and created a theater company that we would use to kind of supplement our education during our time in Atlanta. And I was artistic director of Nasir Productions. And that was still a side gig for me. It was still like what I was doing for fun. It was the way that I felt most kind of connected and alive and powerful was through that work. And it was exciting. And I was still thinking I was going to be an attorney. And at some point during my junior year, the end of my junior year of college, I realized that I really wanted and loved being an artist. And I was nervous, I think, to call my parents and to tell them that I wasn't going to do pre-law, that I wasn't going to law school. I'd taken the LSAT. And when I called my parents and said, I have something to tell you, I really think I want to pursue theater. And I remember saying, look, I'm smart. I can always go back to school. School is a thing. At any time, if this doesn't work out, I'll go back to school. And my parents were very, very chill about it. My mom basically said to my dad, you owe me $10, because they had taken a bet on how long it was going to take me to figure out that I was supposed to be an artist. And so I had their support and belief in the possibility of me as an artist. I had a company that I had created out of passion and love with my friends, with no rules, I wasn't asking anyone for permission to be an artist. I wasn't asking some major regional theater to tell me I was good enough. We were just going to make the work that was important to us, and we were going to serve it to whatever audiences we could reach. And that was going to be enough, because the art itself, the journey, the process was enough. And so once I kind of had that, the freedom of having gone out on that limb and telling my parents, not asking them permission, but telling them this is what I was going to do, and having received their blessing and respect, it was very affirming that if I was going to have a life as an artist, that I was going to need to be able to take hold of that. And that I needed to not seek permission, but to just really be able to walk with clarity and with intention about how I was going to navigate my life. And I don't know that I fully understood at that time, at 20, what that would mean or how challenging that at times would be. But I did understand that that was the decision I was making, right? I remember saying to myself before I picked up that phone to call my parents, no matter what they say, this is what I'm doing. Right? It was that moment where it's I'm grown. This is what I'm doing. And I'm going to be willing to take whatever chips come with this choice, because I actually think this is what is best for me. And this is where my life is aligning. And also I gave myself permission. And this is something that I would say, I have these moments, every 5 years, you have these moments of existential crisis. Is the work enough? Is what you're doing enough? And what I reaffirm for myself every time I face those moments of going, are you still where you're supposed to be? Is that I give myself permission to do something different. I give myself permission to start over. I give myself permission to never feel stuck, right? That every day is an opportunity to make new decisions. And if ever I feel like I am no longer able to serve my purpose in this work, I will leave, because I am capable of doing more, right? This is one vehicle, one pathway to being able to serve. But, I serve, a mighty entity. And I have been blessed with a level of intersectionality. I think we all have been blessed with a level of intersectionality and power and potential that can be met 1,000 ways. And so knowing that means that I was never really stuck. There's a freedom and a liberation of knowing that nobody can put you in a corner, right? Because I don't care about any of this. I care about the work. And that true north began for me really at 20, when I made the decision to walk in this life as an artist.
I think what's so beautiful and admirable is the fact that you had the confidence at that age to say, this is what I know I'm going towards, and I'm going to not stop even for my parents to go for it. I think that's so beautiful. And I also love how you talked a little bit about how Spelman was a part of that journey for you, both of our alma maters. And at Spelman, they teach us that whatever we do, do through the lens of a Black woman, because that is the body that we sit in. And going through complete intersectionality, whether it be a plus size Black woman, a queer Black woman, anything in that aspect, that is the eye and the lens that we create through. So with holding the title of the first Black woman of an artistic director of a regional theater, there was no path or blueprint set for you to enter that space. So I guess my question is, what was the process of you creating your own path and also navigating having to teach people how to work with a Black woman as their leader?
Yeah, I didn't set out to become artistic director of a predominantly white institution, right? Like so this is the other thing for me is like, I started as an artistic director. I started as an artistic leader. I created a company with my friends around a mission we believed in, creating work by us and for whomever that work could touch. When I decided to go into the regional theater, I also did not go into the regional theater with the intention of ending up in this job initially, right? I often use the term that I went in to steal the master's tools, right? That I was like 5 years after running this company and growing it a bit, I realized that there's something that those multi-million-dollar institutions knew that we didn't know. That there were shortcuts, that there were processes, that there are systems. Because all of us who have been working with Nasir Productions at that point, we were all like artists who were doing it out of love. None of us were like trained in nonprofit business management, but suddenly you were wearing 16 different hats. So I was marketing director and finance director and, doing the lights and writing the shows. And like, you're wearing all of these hats and you realize that actually everything you're learning is on the ground learning and that there are systems that exist that would be helpful. And so I went to work at a regional theater specifically to learn what these multi-million-dollar mega theaters knew that our small scrappy theater didn't know and that theaters like ours didn't know. And so I came in not trying to hit the top job, but trying to absorb as much information as I can, trying to have access in every department and to understand how the systems work together so that I could take that learning and integrate it into my work when I left. And what ended up happening for me is that I kept getting opportunities to grow. And I am one who is always enticed by a challenge, by new opportunity. And I saw the difference that I was making because every time I've walked into these regional theaters, I have often been the only. Right. So I was the only, Black woman with curatorial responsibility in the first institution that I was in for almost 10 years, the only Black woman at the table, and then working deeply with new artists and creating opportunities for new artists. And so when you have that kind of platform, your politics around how you do your work has a direct effect on the industry. And so one of the things that I realized, and one of the things that kept me in regional theater early on when I didn't intend to stay, was the recognition of the impact I could have being at that institution with the platform and the resources that that institution had and the reach that an institution had. And so then I started thinking about my work differently. I started thinking about like, okay, so I came in here in order to steal the master's tools. What happens if I actually re-engineer them? What happens if I take these systems that I now know how they work and I reconceive of who actually gets access to this toolbox? What happens if I open the door for artists to come in here, but also use that telephone that's attached to my desk to call the people who sit in these seats all across the country to get them looking at these same artists, many of these artists who've not been at the mainstream platform before? What if I use my access in order to create more access? What is the ripple effect impact of that on the field? How does that change fundamentally the container that we are all working within? And there had never been a me before in that seat in almost every seat I've been in, right? So what would it mean if I left that seat? Would they replace me with a me? No. And so the journey was an interesting one. My first 3 artistic directors were also white men. And it wasn't until I went to go work for a Black man who's an artistic director of a major regional theater that I actually understood that I had walked with a level of privilege that came from my white male artistic directors. And, I've described it this way before, and I really mean this. When I became artistic producer and then associate artistic director at Hartford Stage, people assumed I had to be great because it was long before EDIA was a thing in our industry. There were no Black women in that position anywhere in the country, right? Like I didn't have, when I first started, Kamadi Porter, who was the associate producer at McCarter, and a brilliant, brilliant producer. She ran ETA in Chicago. She was older than me, and she was my everything. She was my sanity. We rode hard together. There wasn't anyone else in those positions that looked like us. And we really leveraged, each of us leveraged our resources and access to blow open the doors for artists who are now very, very mainstream artists, right? But at that time, because there was no one who looked like us in those positions, like when I walked in the room, people were like, oh, she must be great, because why else would they have hired a Black woman to run that? You know what I mean? Like, it was like somehow my excellence had to belie the body I was in, rather than understanding that my excellence was partly because of the body and the intersectionality of who I am, right? Because that's the way supremacy works, right? And so people were like, oh, well, she must be great if he hired her, because why else would he have hired her? And also, she's walking in this room as the voice of this leader. And so even though I did face challenges and obstruction at times, it was mitigated by the fact that I was speaking on behalf of these men.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to work for Kwame Kwei-Armah and Baltimore Center Stage 12 years later, it was really interesting because I found myself in the early days facing more obstruction than I'd ever faced yet at a regional theater. And I was like, oh, I get it now, right? Because, when I first came in, I remember Kwame saying, I want you to introduce yourself to the staff, and I want you to tell them what you've done, tell them what you've worked on, kind of like run your resume. And I was like, that's just not my style. I like for people just to get to know me as an artist. That's just very like, that's like, it feels very pretentious to do it that way. He was like, no, that's what you're going to do.
Mm.
And I did it. And I could feel the energy in the room shift. And afterwards I said to him, I was like, what is that? What was that about? He was like, you just took away their ability to say that the only reason I hired you was because you were Black. He said, I had you run your resume because they have never met anyone as accomplished as you.
Mm.
And once you laid out what you've done, you stripped them of the ability to say that, to marginalize you and to question what we were doing. Because when I became associate artistic director at Baltimore Center Stage, it was the first time there had been a Black artistic director and a Black associate artistic director in the entire country in 70 years. It wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to have 2 of us in the same house. Right?
Right.
So it was revolutionary that he hired me. And we had to work strategically to make sure that the noise did not get in the way of the work.
Mm.
Right? And so, in terms of teaching people how to appreciate and work with a Black woman, I remember when I first started in Hartford, we had at the time he was the technical director, and he was really hard on me. And I tried so hard, I'm 23 years old. I'm trying so hard to be nice. And I realized like I couldn't be nice enough, right? Like I couldn't be nice enough. I was never going to be able to convince this gentleman to respect me and to treat me like I was a peer, because he had already created a narrative about who I must be and what I'm, and because I walked into a room. Remember, I started my career as an artistic director. I didn't start my career having to apologize for who I am.
Right.
And so when I went to work for this organization, I took all of who I was in with me. So if you sent me into a room to make something happen, I walked in the room to make it happen. I didn't apologize for it. I didn't kowtow. I wasn't like, could you please maybe Mr. There was none of that. And I didn't understand at the time that the fact that I didn't come in with a level of humility that met where they thought I was supposed to be created an angst. And so I just found myself so frustrated where I was like, I'm trying to be polite. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to go out of my way. I'm trying to find ways of connecting, and nothing's working. And when I realized that I was never going to be able to move the needle by being nice enough, kind enough, sweet enough, whatever enough, I said, well, then I'll at least be good enough. I will be so effective. I will be the best producer I can be. Since an apology doesn't mean anything to you, or a yes and a please doesn't mean anything to you, then I'm going to walk in the room and I'm just going to do what I do. And I'm going to do it and carry the level of respect that I carry for everybody, but no more trying to like convince you to believe that I'm enough. I'm just going to get the job done. And you coming with me one way or another. We're going over that mountain because that's the job. Now you can walk alongside me and help carry this load, or you can climb up on my back if necessary, but I am going over the mountain. And if I need you to go over the mountain with me in order for me to achieve my job, you were going over that mountain too. And this gentleman actually ended up becoming a very good friend and a great colleague after I stopped trying to win him over, and after I just started like delivering and pushing other people to deliver. And so one of the ways that I think I have taught people to work with me has been to have a level set work ethic and expectation of myself and others. I don't ask anyone to do more than what I do. I often don't ask people to match me where I am because I know how hard I work. But there is a level of expectation if you are going to step into an arena with me that you just have to be at. Because our ability to succeed in spaces that were not built for us, that we were not welcome in, and to create and to recreate them as our own, requires us to excel every time. You got to go over the mountain every time. And success breeds success. So the more you win, the more people are able to convince themselves that it's okay to trust you to do what you are the best at doing, right?
You are the best at doing. Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. And honestly, it is warming my heart just to hear how much you just reiterate that, like, you did not change who you were entering this rooms. Neither does anyone who's listening to this has to. You came in as yourself and you pushed yourself to the work. You committed yourself to the work, which is what drove all of this. And I think that is so just amazing. So in the realm of talking about identity and doing the work through identity, I want to talk a little bit about somebody we both love, Miss Beyonce Giselle. Have you seen the Renaissance film yet?
I have. Houston, Texas, baby.
Come on, I should have known. A part of that film actually made me think about you. So the section she was talking to one of her crew members, and she wanted a like 30-foot long track, I think, for one of the video. For the camera. And they looked her directly in her eye and said, that does not exist. 10 minutes later, Ms. Knowles came back and said, So I just looked it up. This actually does exist,
Mm-hmm.
saying that somebody either wasn't doing their research, didn't want to do the work, whether that be in spite of, or whether that be because, whatever other reason, or they were just playing in her face. And, my question to you is, have there been moments in your career where your expertise has been questioned, or someone has tried to play in your face in that same way? And how did you navigate those moments?
So many. I mean, like, I wish I had to say, I sat in that room and I was like, oh my God, you gonna sit in front of the billionaire that works for you and lie? And I was like, oh, that's every one of us who leads an organization. Like, that is, it is that level of gaslighting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is so unbelievable, and also so regular, so everyday. I mean, that's every day. Every day, somebody comes in and tries to play Boo Boo the Fool, as my mother would say. I'm not Boo Boo the Fool. You're going to come in this room as if I don't already know and tell me what is and what isn't, And I find it most often happens with men. Not always, but most often with men. Because there is and on especially on like technical stuff, right? When you're in this business, will someone tell you, oh, that's not technically possible, because they don't conceive that you have enough experience to be able to get down to the truth, right? And so one of my superpowers is my ability to deconstruct complex questions and puzzles and get down to the root and then rebuild. And so when you come in and you tell me you can't do something or I can't do something, I already know that it's not true. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old niece and a 12-year-old daughter. And we have a mantra that we say. And I have my 3-year-old tell you right now, if I called her in the room, she would say, I can do anything. I can do everything. I can do hard things. I can do hard things every day. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't come in my door and tell me it's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Right? Another moment in that film that I really loved is when he said, oh, they were talking about the lens, and she said, well, you can't get a wide enough lens. And he was like, well, this lens is very wide.
Yeah.
Right. Like, not answering the question, right? Oh, this lens is very wide. She said, but we can't make one wider. If it doesn't exist, we can create it. If it is necessary and it doesn't exist, we're in the business of making things. We have artisans in every single one of these shops. You draw a picture and they can build it. There's an engineer who translates the picture. There are carpenters. There are props masters. There are brilliant artisans in our industry who can literally make anything given the right resources. So when you tell me something cannot be done, what you really mean is you have not done the work to figure out what resources are necessary in order to achieve it. And you can't come in my room and you can't exit my space without having presented the necessary resources to achieve the thing. And then it is my job to make the decision about whether or not those resources are worth the end results, right? Sometimes, in order to get to the thing that I want, you might say, okay, well, this is beyond the scope financially. This is beyond the scope. The additional resourcing it will take to get to that thing is exponentially more than we can afford to invest in that moment. That's not your decision to make. That's my decision to make. Your job is to come to me with the information and for me to figure out whether or not or how I'm going to use the political capital and resources that we have. It is actually very simple. It is incredibly frustrating to every day be confronted with people who, and it doesn't matter, like somebody come in, you've been in the business 25 years, they've been in the business 2 years, they're gonna come in and tell you what it is. or talk to you like you have no possible information or experience that could counter the narrative. And then when you do, ask the questions. And I do it through the form of questions, right? You and I have worked together, so you know how this works. You come in, they come in, and I just start asking questions. And I keep asking questions, and they answer the questions. And as I go through my series of questions, it becomes very clear. Usually there's a level of embarrassment that they feel in the moment. Sometimes they feel like they have been exposed. And I always feel like that is not often when I start these questions, I'm not entirely sure what's going to come out because I don't know how you got to where you got to. I'm just trying to get to the answer, right?
And I'm sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, I was just saying from observation, just working with you, and sometimes it switches. The minute you ask those questions and it becomes clear that you are not the one who is actually, stopping the process, it's turned on you to where you're the bad guy now.
Absolutely.
Because now you are the one who's saying, did you do the work that you were supposed to do before coming to me?
And then you're difficult, right? Then you're a tyrant. And I'm like, oh, I don't, and it's an interesting thing because again, I try and understand, I really try and move from a place of empathy. It is again, another one of those like leadership superpowers to be able to understand whoever's across from you, their starting point and how they arrived at the place and to have a level of compassion and understanding from it. I often do not feel that reciprocated, right? I don't feel often in those moments that I'm facing someone who's actually trying to understand where I sit or how I ended up in this place or why this is so important to me. Mm-hmm. They're not looking at the macro lens of what we're trying to do. They're looking at whatever element is an inconvenience to them. Right?
Yeah.
Part of why it is so befuddling to me is because I was raised by Hana Sharif. And my mama required a level of accountability for everything. I have never been able to walk through this world and not be accountable for the things that I have done or not done and the ramifications of my action or my inaction. Never. I was a child and I was required to be accountable. And I require my children to be accountable because I was raised by Hana Sharif and they are being raised by Hana Sharif. And so I, in the same way that I walk in as my full self into work, I bring that same level of ethic and accountability into my workplace. And so people, I think we are most successful. The people who I love, and I love the people I work with, right? We soar when we align. And what I found is that most people want to do good work. Most people want to be able to achieve the magnificent impact that you can achieve working at the level and scale that we're working at. They want clarity of information. They want clear leadership. They want to be heard and their expertise respected. And they want to be able to deliver. They want to be given the resources, time being one of them, in order to do their best work. That is the overwhelming majority of people that work in our field. There are those that are more interested in shortcuts, but they are the rare minority. But they can stymie a process if allowed. And so I work really hard not to allow processes and the work of everyone else to be stymied. And that sometimes means that you end up being the supervillain in their story. But my job is not to be everyone's best friend, but to be the best, most compassionate, and most effective leader that I can be in service of the work of transforming lives through this art.
Yeah. Thank you. And honestly, I think about it and I think about that moment and how it reminded me a lot of just navigating and being able to observe you for a while. And I think about how much it is, right? How much it is to be a Black woman, not only a Black woman who is working within this American theater industry, but also a Black woman who has two beautiful children, who has a sister, who has a husband, who has a beautiful niece and family, and a plethora of friends who you love and who love you. And I saw this quote on Facebook, and it said, "Give, but don't let it empty you." As someone who has not figured out how to give, I think that a lot of us, we give a lot until we don't realize that we've given it all.
Yeah.
So do you personally, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, have like a measurement, or how do you measure how much to give so that doing the job doesn't take everything out of you?
It's such a good question. And I will be the first to say that I don't have all the answers. I have more than once given until I was at empty, or till I was facing the wall, recognizing that if I hit that wall, it would be very difficult. It would not be impossible to come back, but it was going to take time and it would be very difficult. And I've gotten far too close to the edge of overgiving in my career. I will say that I am now at a space in my life, in all aspects of my life, where I'm choosing to move differently. When I accepted this job at Aetna Stage, I made a commitment to myself that if I was going to lead another company, this magnificent company, I was going to have fun. That was my commitment. I was going to have fun. If I was going to do this job, it was going to be fun for me. Right? The last time I did this job, it was there was so much else I was carrying, and that I privileged over what I knew was important to me. And I have learned institutions are takers, not givers. If they will take as much as you are willing to give, and when you are done giving, when you have nothing left to give, they will move on and find someone else who can stand in that space and give more. And so if you're going to be in an institution, you have to understand the nature of the institution. And you also have to understand what you are getting out of that process and relationship. I work in institutional theater because I believe in the power, the transformative power of the impact of the work on community, and that's how I serve. And so my calling and my why is bigger than me. That's the thing that keeps me focused. But I also understand that if my cup is empty, I have nothing to pour forth. And what I also know to be true is that when you are in a non-reciprocal relationship, it can create space for you to fall on yourself in other non-reciprocal relationships. You become comfortable with inequity, and it can become your starting point. And I am now in my 40s, and I am in a place where that is not reasonable in any aspect of my life. Not my work life, not my personal life, not my family life. I am no longer interested in non-reciprocal relationships. I am no longer interested in being in spaces where I do not have the ability to grow, to flourish, to feel and experience joy, and to serve in a way that is refueling rather than depleting. And so part of my journey has been some lessons by trial and error, some lessons by realizing, oh, if I give too much in this area and I'm not being balanced in this area, it's not going to work. And so the result of that kind of trial and error has been me creating very real boundaries. And I'm in the process of reminding myself to uphold those boundaries. It is a journey for me because I think am one of those people. There are many different types of people. But I, in all aspects of my life, tend to be a nurturer and tend to be someone who is very invested in making sure that all the people around me are watered. And so I have a habit of watering myself last in all of the different areas of my life. And so that is shifting in a very profound and powerful way in my life over the last couple of years. And I always say that it has been adjustment for everybody. It's been an adjustment in my work life. It's been an adjustment in my personal life because people get very comfortable with the systems that are set up. And one of the things that I think is true, and again, this crosses beyond work, it goes back and forth because they're actually very much tied together. I had to stop and say, okay, well, what is my complicitness in my unhappiness? I'm not unhappy because this job is this way. I'm not unhappy because this relationship is this way. I played a hand in creating the dynamics in every part of my life. And so once I can take accountability for the ways that I have been complicit of overworking myself, allowing people to push past the norms of what is reasonable in terms of their expectations of me or their responsibility for themselves and their jobs or whatever area of your life you're talking about. Once I got clear that people can't boundary step if I don't let them boundary step, and that once I allow people to boundary step, I have moved the boundaries. And then I'm just pretending like the boundary still exists, that's on me. And so how do I then create new boundaries and hold myself to them in service of being able to do more of the work and feel refilled and refueled by it, and to be able to thrive in service and not be drained by service? That has been a powerful shift for me. It is at times uncomfortable because it necessitates making other people uncomfortable. It necessitates making people move out of lanes that they were very, very used to.
Yeah.
And it requires centering myself in a way that I have gotten very used to decentering myself.
Yeah.
I wish I had made some of these moves earlier, but I also understand that I needed the life experience. Personally, I needed the life experience to get to the place where I could stand really clear and saying, oh, okay, well, this is what the next 40 years of my life are about to be like.
Yeah. Thank you. And you mentioned something earlier. You said if your cup is empty, you have nothing to pour forth. And when you talk about that fulfillment and you talk about, filling yourself back up, where do you go back to? What brings you joy where you know that you've been filled up in order to give more?
I love rest is a really important element. And figuring out what things, everyone has their own stuff, right? I am someone who loves the sun. I love to be in the middle of the ocean. I live a life that is very loud. There are lots of people. We work in the theater. You're surrounded by people always. You have children, you have family. Like there's rarely quiet. And so part of my refueling is actually isolation. I take a solo vacation every year, and that is time that is strictly for me. I let my family know when I've landed. I let them know when I'm leaving. I might check in on folks if I feel like it during my time away. But really that time is spent reconnecting with me, with Hana, not Hana artistic director, not Hana wife, not Hana mother or daughter or sister or any of the other roles that I play for other people, but really trying to have time to realign with the woman and the spirit inside this body. And what I have started to do actually is to find other points along the way for realignment. Whenever I can get quiet, I cherish it. I value it. When I'm traveling for work, my family's always like, well, you had so much time away. And I was like, no. Work time is late night meetings and calls. You're always, again, you're being pulled in a lot of different directions. especially at this level of leadership, a lot of it is about relationship building and networking and moving the needle on things. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of showing up at the right places with the right people and having the right conversations, right? It is, and being responsive and being on top of responding. And so when I can really shut it down, I shut it down, and I love every single moment of going off the grid. And it makes me really excited to come back when I've had enough time away. And I know I haven't had enough time off the grid when I dread turning the phone back on or turning the computer back on. When my cup has been refilled, I'm ready. When my cup is only halfway filled, my body's like, we're weak. So I'm still, I will say I'm a work in progress on that. But I am learning. I love to read. It is part of the decompression for me, is reading. I love listening to music. And then when I find myself having not listened to music, like, I know that I'm out of alignment when I'm leaning too much towards podcasts and not enough towards music, because the podcast engages one part of my brain, the music releases another. And sometimes when I'm too far aligned, I will move away from the music and not have a balance there. And so I'm learning to like okay, wait a minute now. You're activating this part of your brain.
Yeah, that's a good observation too, And speaking of music, it actually it's a beautiful segue to my last question. You ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So if you had to make a playlist that contained 5 songs that span your entire career up until now,
yes,
what would those 5 songs be? And you can tell us why or not, but what would those 5 songs be?
That is such a hard question. I have to tell you, it is a hard question. There are some songs that come immediately to mind for different moments in my career. But one song, okay, so one song that I definitely think is the root of my why, I would say, is Bigger, Beyonce's song Bigger. Someone asked me in an interview recently, like, basically what motivates you? Like, what is the thing that has most defined your career? And I said, my understanding that I'm part of a continuum. My understanding that my work is not mine. That my work is part of this legacy of women, Black women who have come before me, and part of the legacy of all of the women who are in alignment coming just behind me and behind those and behind those. And so if you understand from the beginning that you are part of a collective, then it informs the way you move, right? The ego becomes secondary. Mm-hmm. And that true north is very profoundly liberating for me. And so when I think about Bigger, that idea that you're part of something way bigger, right? That when you were born into something bigger than you, feels like the roots of my why. I would say, skipping forward to this moment, I'm going to skip around a little bit. One of the songs that I listen to almost every day as part of my start to my day is Jhené Aiko's trigger protection mantra, which, if you have not heard, is a very powerful, centering mantra that settles me into my body and calls for a level of protection as I walk through the day. And I did not have that in my practice at my last job. And it has been profound to have it in my practice now. So I love that one. One of the songs that comes like immediately, as soon as you said the first song that came to mind, because it has met me at different points in my development and is a truly powerful and magnificent manifestment song, is Mary Mary's Go Get It. I bump that nonstop all the time, every day. That is, there have been moments where it was like, it's your time. Go get your blessings. You don't have to apologize for it. You don't have to. You have done what is necessary, and you have been delivered to this moment. The only thing for you is to step in and go get it. Nobody's gonna give it to you. Just go get it. So I love that song, and again, met me at multiple stages of my career. I think also, if I think about the beginning of my career, if I think about the beginning, I would say the beginning of the second stage of my career is I went into like regional theater. Another song for me would be Shaka Khan's I'm Every Woman. Which again, I think connects to this whole idea of continuum and legacy. But also, like, I was entering a space where I was going into my mid-20s. I just, during that time, gotten married and really felt a shift from girlhood to womanhood, and to understanding that the power of being a woman, which everything in our society tries to mitigate, and they work so hard to mitigate it because they understand the root of the power. And that moment where I was like, oh, this is what it means to be a woman, was cracking the universe open. And that song, I'm Every Woman, reminds me of that. Is that 5? How many is that?
That was 4.
4.
One more.
Fifth song. There are like 4 of them that come to mind, but the one I'm gonna say, I almost don't want to say it because our brother is so mentally ill in this moment. Kanye's Ultralight Beam. This is a God's dream. This is a God's dream. There are moments of lucidity. I'm just going to say I continue to pray for our brother to be supported and able to come back to some level of center. But that aside, I would say that song, Ultralight Beam, it is what I love, separate from the kind of deep, kind of beautiful spiritualness of the song, is also the reminder, like sometimes I wake up and I go, wow, this is my life. This is my life. This is the life that has been manifested by me, with me, for me. And it's not done yet. And I know there are even bigger things to come. And that we were meant for a stratosphere that is just much bigger than what we conceive and perceive and conceive. Right? There's the thing about what representation matters, because if you can see it, you can be it. And I think that there's a seeing there's the seeing, and then there is this kind of ability to see beyond what has been manifested. And every time I have the experience of seeing with a different eye, I feel so humble. I feel so grateful and small and centered and powerful. And, to me, it's like that ultralight beam. You are an ultralight beam. This is a God stream. It's like you can't, what are you even talking about?
Right.
You can't make the reality happen. I just came back from Poland, seeing Polish theater at this festival and speaking with these artists and getting to know some of the people I was traveling with, this American contingent, small American contingents. And on my flight home, I just remember going, like this theater thing, this theater thing has taken me all around the world. Poland's like the 50th country. You know what I mean? Like passport on passport, replacement, booked up, stamped up, from theater. And that it's taken me all around the world and exposed me and introduced me and given me the opportunity to understand myself in a very different way, and to understand our work in a very different way, and to understand culture in a very different way, and to also understand what it means to be fundamentally human. And that, every time I come back from a trip, I go, okay, there's more work to be done. There's more service to do, but also this is a God's dream.
This is a God's dream. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think that was a beautiful note for us to end. Thank you so much, Hana, for coming, for being here today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you will join us at the next episode of Sisters in the Round. Thank you.